Oh, I will say one thing right now. I think I figured out why this area is crashing. Although I can't get anybody to respond on the Discord yet, but I think I know why this is crashing here. So I've been running into this issue over here where the game just straight up crashes on one particular section of the map, and only that particular section of the map, at least so far. There might be a similar problem in other sections of the map, but I don't know about them right now. But I have been able to identify what's going on with this section of the map. So let me just go over here real quick and explain that. Any information in here somewhere? No, somebody made this. It's basically a representation of the Fallout map that we have here. And it's kind of clear once you start looking at it, when you start identifying where the towns are. Dayglow, Windover, Groom Lake, Las Vegas. Those are all the big towns. At least Red Sands is the only other one, but you know. Your starting point is right here. There's Elko. Once the Elko stuff is done, there's shelters back here. But anyway, there's Elko, and let's take a look at what we got over here. So we can identify a couple of towns on here. We have Elko there, we have Dayglow there, and we have Windover there. So by process elimination, we can actually identify where this exact square is. Here's Elko, here's Dayglow, and here's Windover. All right, let's start counting the number of tiles. So we got one tile here, another tile here, a third tile here. Here's number 4, and then number 5. So we got 5 tiles down from Windover, or 1, 2, 3 tiles down from Dayglow. Let's go with Dayglow. I think it might be a little slightly closer. 1, 2, 3 tiles down from Dayglow. And then 1, 2, 3 tiles to the east of Dayglow. So 3 by 3 down from Dayglow. So here's Dayglow right here. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And that's the top corner of the square. You can literally make out exactly which ones are crashing based on that square there. There we go. So you should be able to reasonably easily make out that this is the square for the caravan encounters. While you can easily make that out, something slightly more useful isn't just knowing that it's the caravan encounters, because not everything is identified with the same name as what's on here. We need the actual square numbers that are in here. If you look at a vanilla Fallout 2 map, Fallout 1 is the same way. If you look at a vanilla map here, the vanilla game, as you can see, has all these grid squares, all these grid lines set up. That is because each world map tile, which is like this size, is portioned up into these little grid squares. And each of these little grid squares represent one, not type, but one encounter table that you can run into. So you have a different encounter table for each grid, or you assign the same encounter table into multiple grids, but you can have a different one for each little grid square here. And because of this, we go all the way down here, all the way to the bottom, and we can see how these are actually, these are the encounter grid squares right here. And each line is 1 for 1 for each grid square. Going back to here, we need the tile number. Each of these are a whole map tile. We need the whole map tile number, and then we need the position in that map tile. And what we have here is we have tiles 0, 1, 2, 3, because it starts at 0, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then 8, and then 9. So we got tile 9 here, and it crosses over into tile 10. You can just make that out there. And in tile 9 here, the 0 through 6 indicators are the position in the tile. So each, as you can see, goes 0 through 6, resets 0 through 6, 0 through 6, and 0 through 6. And the same thing, 0 through 5 going down. It's the size of the tiles set up like that for whatever reason. No one asked me, I didn't make it. 0 through 6 in the X direction, 0 through 5 in the Y direction. So we can just line it up right here. Here's a caravan. We just go straight to the top. It's 5. So tile number 9, X index 5, Y index over here. We just go to the left 3. So 5 by 3 through 5 by 4 and 5 by 5. So that's this column right here, because the tiles are actually not the tiles, but the encounter system allocates the encounters vertically instead of horizontally. And we can take a look, and I'll show you that a little bit over here. And pop this on the right for a sec. We'll show you where are we on tile 2. Let's go to tile. We need tile 9 anyway, so I'll show you from tile 9. Okay. So 0, 0, these are the X and Y coordinates. So it goes 0, 0, 0, 1, 0, 2, 0, 3. So the X coordinate is the left one, the Y coordinate is the right one, and all the X coordinates are 0, and then it increments the Y coordinates. So we're going in the vertical direction down, because Y starts in the top left is 0. And so from here, we're looking at 5, 3, 4, 5, 6, 3, 4, 5, tile number 10, 0, 3, 4, 5. So 5, 3, 4, 5. So these 3 right here. 6, 3, 4, 5, these 3 right here. And then down here, tile 10, 0, 3, 4, 5, these three right here. And if we open these up, we can see the one thing that's common between all of them is this one encounter. And in fact, if we scroll up and down, we can kind of see it over here in the map. Those are all the encounters that look like this. And if we did a search for it, we could get an exact count. 8 of 10. So there's a total of 10 entries that match this encounter name. As you can count right here, 3, 6, 9. There's 9 here. That means that the 10th entry is the definition for it right here. So there we go. There's our thing. Entry 1 is the definition. Entries 2 through 10 are the place where they're assigned. So this particular encounter seems to be the encounter I'm having trouble with whenever I try to walk onto it in the world map, which over here is called just caravan encounter or armor caravan, and this over here it's called WMM NCR caravan. Anyway, each individual square is one of these encounters. The one that I'm particularly looking at are these sets of squares here, which I've already identified as being these sets of squares here, and this is the encounter that we're running into. And this encounter, it's actually not the individual maps. It is actually these encounters here. The way this encounter table is set up is actually going to cause the system to crash every time. And I can, of course, demonstrate that briefly by just walking into them right there. And we didn't crash. You see, there we go. Anytime we actually get an encounter in any of these squares, it'll crash. The reason is something that I think I've identified correctly. I'm not 100% on this, but I think I have. We don't need you anymore. You can close. Identified this correctly. This is the actual C code from the Fallout engine. No, this isn't the source code. As far as like the raw source code that was compiled from, this is decompiled from the Fallout 2 executable. As we go through here, it does some pretty obvious stuff. It checks to see if the current subtitle is assigned correctly, which is a global variable. If it's not, it assigns it here. Find current subtitle. So I guess those are called subtiles. If we look at it, so according to the actual, or at least what's over here decompiled, those might be called subtiles as opposed to just a regular tile. So we just walk through this briefly. It's not too terribly long. There it is at the end right there. The most of what this does is just pick the encounter that you're going to have. It pulls the current subtitle, assigns it to the global variable. There's an encounter table we get from where we identify the encounter type from the current subtitle. The encounter type is this right here. This is the encounter type. So then it assigns the encounter table ID based on that type. This is the encounter table ID, so theoretically 24. And we create a pointer that points to that encounter table from the encounter table list like this. The ID's indexed into it. We pull the list. We assign it here. Candidates, an array of 41 ints. Not sure what's going on with there, because this isn't actually. I'm still trying to parse through this, but anyway, not sure why 41 ints exactly, and all this other stuff. This obviously puts some limitations onto how many encounters you can have, but I'm not 100% on this yet still. Candidates linked 0, so this increments every time we actually get a new candidate in here. Total chance equals 0. This is calculated down here at the bottom of this for loop. Then we got this big for loop here. In this for loop, we go through each of the encounter table entries. So this is the encounter table. We have 2 entries right here for WMM, World Map M, NCR Caravan, whatever. We're looping through all the encounter table entries. These are the encounter table entries. There are 2 on this encounter table. Bool selected equals true, and then in the first conditional here, for this for loop, world map eval conditional. And I'm still trying to parse my way through this particular function. There's not much to it, but it's enough that I'm fairly questionable about a couple things. Either way, the idea for this part, WM eval conditional, is that it's supposed to take these conditionals that you have here, the if checks here, and the if checks here, there's 2 of them here, and parse them. And then return whether or not this encounter can be chosen as an encounter here, right? And if it's equivalent to 0, i.e. if it's false, I don't know why he didn't write out false here, but anyway, if it returns false here, then selected is assigned false. It's switched from true to false. And it goes down here and it does another thing for the encounter entry counter. So this is this counter right here, which every single entry that I've ever seen that uses a counter, it sets the counter to 1. And that's it. You can have higher than 1 for a counter. You can have 2, 3, 4, 5. You probably have up to the size of an int for a counter. But what this does is it limits the number of times you can have this particular encounter. Some people were taught to use global variables to prevent you from getting the counter more than once, so that you only get the encounter if the global variable is 0, and then you increment the global variable in the map, and then they won't be able to get the counter again. But this is how it's supposed to actually be used. You're supposed to use this counter here, and this is where it checks that counter. If it's equivalent to 0, then selected equals false, and then either way, we got selected equals false here. If there's no match here, or the encounter table is 0, then we get this turned to false, and we go down here, and if selected, so if it finds a map, and the counter on that map is not 0, it's 1 or 2 or something like that, then selected will be true, because it's assigned true here, and it's just switched here. And then we get down here, and this is where it assigns the index right here, going through the encounter table's entries index. So we're looking for the index for the entry. The index as an int is assigned to this candidate's array of 41 candidates here. And then the total chance is the encounter table entry chance, which is this right here. That's it. That's what's assigned to it, total chance. Now, the problem is, if we come here and all the eval conditionals for an encounter evaluate to false, and it doesn't find a map here, it returns false here, and selected is set to false so that it doesn't go through this part of the function over and over again, because all of the entries are blocked off from the player getting, because their global variables are not set appropriately, and there's only 2 entries here, and they both check for global variables. If your character doesn't have one of those global variables set, or all the global variables set in order to have one of these encounters, or the encounter's already been had and the counter has been decremented already, something like that, anything that prevents them from getting the encounter, if all the encounters are blocked off from the player, it will go through this loop all the way to the end, and then selected will be false the entire time, because this will prevent it from actually having an encounter, or this will prevent it from having an encounter. It'll be false the entire time, and this will never get run, right? So these two will never get run. Candidates will never be assigned. So this is initialized as 0, just an array of zeros. And then total chance will never be assigned, so it's also 0. And if we go down here, candidates and total chance are, here's total chance right here for V2 roll random, 0 to total chance. Well, if total chance is 0, because it never got actually updated, then this is 0 to 0. So we just get a roll random from 0 to 0. So this is V2 ends up being 0. Now that they add V1 into it, but V1 is your luck minus 5. I don't remember what my luck is. It's not really important. But either way, then there's some increments besides your luck for little perks you can take as a player. Explorer, Ranger, Scout, +2 for Explorer, +1 for Ranger and Scout. So if your luck is 5, this would be 0, +2, +3, +4. If your luck is less than 5, it would subtract from it. If your luck was greater than 5, it would add to it. Either way, around 4. And then it pulls the game difficulty here. And then if the game difficulty is easy, it adds a value. And if it's hard, it subtracts and it caps it. So it's not greater than total chance, which is never assigned. Once again, it's 0. So it ends up being 0 here if it's like that. If it's less than 5, then it subtracts it and it ends up being 0. Or it doesn't end up, well, yeah, it ends up being 0 here as well. If it subtracts it and it ends up being less than 0, it assigns 0. So either way, total chance is 0, remember, coming out of here, because it never got assigned. So it's either 0 or 0. That's what it ends up being. That's what V2 ends up being, no matter what else happens here. And then down here, this isn't where it's going to crash yet. We're close, though. This is where it's going to crash. But anyway, we're really close. So once V2 is 0 coming out of here, either on easy or hard, if it's on normal, nothing actually happens to it, oddly. We're not really clear on why they didn't actually do anything to it. Like, they should have capped it one way or the other, but they didn't. So either way, if it's on normal, it just comes out as like 4, that nothing happens there. But if otherwise, it ends up being 0. Anyway, we're going through the encounter table entry one more time. We got the entries candidates number index. Now remember, index is a new, it goes, this is the counter right here from 0 to candidate's length. But candidate's length is 0 because it never got incremented. It never got called in here. So it's supposed to be incremented here, but because this never got called, it's going to be 0. Just like candidates is going to be an array of zeros, and total chance is going to be 0. In this for loop here, this is going to be from 0 to 0. So it's just going to go once. I'm interrupting this in the middle of editing because it turns out that loop doesn't run at all, which means that index will come out 0 anyway, no matter what. Index never increments, and it just stays 0. So we're trying to get index out of here, but index is going to end up 0 because it's always zeros down here. And once we're done with this loop and it breaks out right here, Then we're into this right here, this little if check, and this is where the crash starts to happen, because this is actually where the crashing line is, but this is where the crash, I think, starts to happen. He checks your index against your candidate's length. And if you look back up here again, here's our candidate's length. It's assigned 0 at start. The only place it's changed is here. If it never actually runs this, candidate's length ends up being 0. Candidates ends up being an array of 0. Total chance is 0. All of this is 0. So we're just leading with a bunch of zeros. So index is 0. Again, breaking out of here. Index is 0. Candidate's length is 0. The equivalency check evaluates to true. And then index is candidate's length minus 1 as a result of that. And what is 0 minus 1? Well, that's -1. So where is index called next? On candidates right here. And so we have candidates of index of -1. What do you think happens when you pull an array and you call index -1? We get a crash. And that is the crash that happens over and over and over again whenever I'm running into this particular square right here. Come on. There you go. The instruction at blah, blah, blah referenced memory at blah, blah, blah. The memory could not be read from. So I'm pretty sure that's our crash right there. And I'm pretty sure the reason is because both of these have global variable checks that prevent me from getting any encounter here. So if we're making stuff for old Fallout 2 here, it looks like every single encounter table, because of this minor bug, very minor bug, like it's not really important normally, but it's something to worry about when you're creating your encounter tables. So if you don't have an encounter, just one, you need at least one, but just one encounter in all of your tables that the player can get with no restrictions. If you don't have just one encounter in all of your tables that the player can get with 0 restrictions to it, it will crash when it tries to pull up an encounter from that table. So that, I'm pretty sure, is what was causing my crash here. The solution obviously is just to add a single encounter or remove some of these restrictions here. Obviously I didn't write these, so I'm just going to leave the restrictions in place, and I'm going to add an encounter. Get back into this. I just wanted to cover that. Like, this is I spent the last 3 days trying to read through all the things here to try and figure out where that specific crash was. Actually, I wonder if Alex Batalov's Fallout CE. I wonder if he fixed that bug in Fallout CE. That's actually an interesting question. Over here. Those you. Extracted. There it is. Interesting. All right, whatever. This is worth a try. We have other issues here, apparently. I didn't realize that. That kind of sucks.